Welcome back to another deep dive. We're picking up where we left off with Allan Smithee's guide to interviewing for competitive intelligence.
You got it.
And just a reminder for our listeners, Allan Smithee.
Right.
It's a pen name to keep our source under the radar and keep him effective out there in the field.
Absolutely.
This week,
Yeah.
we're diving into some really advanced stuff. So
Oh, yeah.
buckle up.
This is where things get really interesting, for sure.
So to set the scene, these tactics we're going to be talking about today are really best used for dealing with what Smithee calls
Cold sources,
cold sources. Yeah.
people who don't have an existing relationship with you or your company.
Right.
And this is especially relevant when you're thinking about when you're using a third party
Okay.
for market research or competitive intelligence, because they can often get access to information that your company just could never get directly
Oh, interesting.
because it's seen as competition.
Right. Or
Okay.
whatever.
Yeah.
They're kind of flying under the radar.
Yeah, exactly.
But that brings up a really important point, and that's the ethical considerations.
Oh, absolutely.
When you're dealing with people like this,
Yes.
what are the ethical considerations we need to be thinking about?
Smithee is very clear that ethical behavior is non-negotiable. And especially in this context, honesty about who you are
Right.
and your company affiliation
Of course.
is absolutely paramount.
You're playing the game, but you're playing it fair.
That's right.
Now, Smithee has a really interesting suggestion.
Yeah.
He suggests practicing these techniques
Yes.
on less critical,
Absolutely.
more peripheral
Yeah.
sources first,
Like a warm-up.
like a warm-up, right?
Absolutely.
And this serves a couple of really interesting purposes, I think.
Yeah.
Number one, you're refining your technique, right?
Right.
Honing your skills in a low-pressure environment.
Yes.
But also, you're gathering valuable insight from those peripheral sources.
Exactly. You're exactly right.
They have a different angle on the company.
They have a different perspective that often you miss
Yeah.
if you're too close to the core.
Totally.
So it's really interesting to get those outside perspectives before you kind of zoom in
Right.
on the main target.
Okay, this is where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
Smithee actually advises against
He does.
leaving voicemails
Yes.
or
Yeah.
sending emails to people that you don't know.
Correct.
He advocates for the cold call,
Yes.
which is interesting
I know.
because you think you'd want to have some kind of introduction, right?
Well, yeah, the logic is that you increase the chances of actually having a conversation.
Right.
Because if you give them too much time
Right.
to think about whether they should be talking to you,
Right.
then they may not.
Of course. So
It's kind of a bold move,
it is bold,
but I can see how it would be very effective.
especially if time is of the essence,
Yeah.
which it often is. But the catch is you have to be prepared.
You've got to be so prepared.
You have to be able to articulate the purpose of your call very clearly and comfortably.
Concisely.
And Smithee talks about, he mentions name dropping a mutual contact.
Yeah.
Like that can really build instant credibility, can it?
It's a total rapport builder.
Yeah.
It's a signal that you're not just some rando
Yeah, right.
calling out of the blue. You have a connection.
Now, this is where Smithee throws in some brain power.
Yes.
He warns us about
He does.
cognitive biases.
Absolutely.
And this isn't just for interviewers, right?
No, not at all.
This is for everyone.
Everyone involved in the process. Yeah,
Like we could fall victim to it as well.
totally.
Like confirmation bias, for example.
Yeah, just favoring information that confirms our existing beliefs.
Right.
And ignoring things that contradict them.
Right.
Which we all do.
So you might be hearing what you want to hear,
Exactly.
not necessarily
Right.
what's being said.
That's right.
And then there's availability bias.
Right. Relying on the information that's most readily available to us.
Right. So even if it's not the most accurate information,
Yeah.
it's the easiest to recall. So
Exactly.
we jump on it.
Right.
What about anchoring bias?
Anchoring bias is when we fixate on the first piece of information we receive,
Even if it's irrelevant.
even if it's completely irrelevant.
Yeah.
So that initial information becomes an anchor.
Right.
And it influences all of our judgment.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So you really have to be aware
Super aware.
of these things.
Absolutely.
Okay. Back to some of Smithee's interviewing tips.
Okay.
He's a big advocate for making it
Yeah.
a two-way street.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
So he even suggests
He does.
sharing non-confidential
Yes.
information experiences.
Yes.
The way to
Yeah,
encourage
to build that sense of kinship.
kinship, right? Like
we're all on the same team.
yeah, hey, we're in this together.
Yeah, exactly.
And he even talks about a well-placed
Oh, yeah.
anecdote.
Yes, a screw-up story.
Ah, a screw-up
Yeah,
story.
right.
Like that can break the ice.
A little icebreaker.
Yeah, and create a connection, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, Smithee doesn't mince words when it comes to ego.
No.
He says, leave it at the door.
Absolutely.
The goal of the interview is to gain knowledge.
It's to learn.
Not to impress
yes, right.
the person you're talking to.
So it's fine to ask dumb questions.
It's okay to ask, like get clarification.
Yes. Much better to ask a dumb question than to make assumptions.
Right, okay.
And end up with bad information.
So Smithee dives into a list of red flags.
He does.
To watch out for.
Yes.
During an interview.
Absolutely.
Ambiguity.
Jargon.
Boasties.
Inconsistencies.
Hedges.
What are hedges?
What are hedges?
So a hedge is like a real long, thoughtful pause.
Okay.
Followed by a super vague response.
Okay.
Or maybe they use wishy-washy language, like we believed at the time. Does that mean they still believe it?
Right.
I don't know.
So even what's not being said can be just as important as what is being said.
It's all about the subtleties of language.
Right.
Yeah.
Really reading between the lines.
Yeah.
And don't hesitate to ask for clarification.
Please don't, especially during due diligence.
Okay, so Smithee provides us with some really pointed questions.
He does.
For getting deeper insights.
Yep.
And one of the suggestions is to ask, like, what is the most important thing about ...
Right.
Fill in the blank.
Yeah, the most important thing about...
The most misunderstood thing about... Overhyped, yeah.
Unappreciated.
You're really trying to get... Beyond the surface.
Push past the superficial to really get at...
The heart of it.
Yeah, the heart of it, exactly.
And he also says, rephrase questions if you need to.
Absolutely.
To make sure that you're understanding.
Not only to confirm your understanding, but also to encourage the source to elaborate.
Right.
By asking the question in a different way.
Right.
Sometimes you can get
more detail.
Way more detail and more insights.
Interesting.
That you wouldn't have thought of before.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's about keeping the conversation going.
It's about building that relationship, not just extracting the information.
Right. So Smithee suggests leaving the door open.
Yes.
For future contact.
Absolutely.
Even maybe hinting at potential collaborations.
Right.
Down the road.
Exactly.
Okay. And he has a really good tip about tapping into networks.
Yeah.
So he says,
ask
the source.
Yes.
If they know any consultants.
Yeah. Consultants, recently retired people.
Okay.
People who've been in the industry a while.
Right. Yeah.
They're often a gold mine.
Okay, and finally, we get to some really advanced territory here.
Yes.
Elicitation.
This is the good stuff.
So elicitation, this is a technique that's used by intelligence professionals, both government and industry, to gather information without direct questioning.
Without direct questioning, that's right.
So you're like a conversational ninja.
Kind of, yeah.
Extracting information without them even realizing it's happening.
Exactly.
So this is obviously something that requires special training.
Yes, training and constant practice.
Right. But it sounds incredibly powerful.
It's powerful stuff.
Especially when you're dealing with people who might be reluctant.
Yes.
To share information.
Yeah, you're right.
So let's talk about how elicitation works.
Yeah.
In practice.
Yeah.
What are the key principles here?
The essence of elicitation is to guide the conversation subtly.
Okay.
Right? To encourage the source to volunteer information without feeling interrogated.
So you're steering the conversation in a way that allows them to give you the information that you want.
Exactly.
And it's interesting you say that elicitation often involves minimizing questions.
That's right.
Especially in the beginning and the end.
At the beginning and the end.
At the interaction.
At the interaction, yeah.
Which is interesting.
It's counterintuitive.
It seems counterintuitive, right? Because you think, oh, I've got to ask questions to get the information.
Totally.
But you're saying, no, actually, the fewer questions you ask, the less likely you are to raise red flags.
That's right.
Okay, so you're flying under the radar.
Yeah.
Gathering information. Without making it obvious what you're after.
That's right.
And sticking to broad topics.
Yeah.
At the beginning and the end.
Beginning and the end.
So you're not tipping your hand.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's talk about some of these elicitations.
Okay, let's do it. Tactics that Smithee outlines.
That's where things get really fun.
All right. That's where we'll pick up in part 2 of our deep dive.
I'm excited.
Me too. Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of elicitation.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much we can learn from seemingly random bits of information.
Absolutely.
If we know how to sort of gently steer the conversation.
It's true. And we're talking about really powerful techniques, especially in the realm of due diligence.
Right. High stakes.
High stakes.
Information.
Yeah. Where the information is closely guarded.
Right. People might have NDAs, worried about their careers.
Yeah.
All sorts of stuff.
So elicitation is really about drawing that information out without direct questioning.
Right. Or making them feel pressured.
Right. Or being too aggressive.
It's like a more elegant.
It's much more elegant. It's a gentler approach to intelligence gathering.
Like a conversational detective.
Yeah.
Piecing together clues.
From seemingly random bits of information.
That's right. You've got to be observant.
Right.
You've got to have patience.
Be adaptable.
You got to be adaptable. You got to be able to read people.
Yeah.
Pick up on those subtle cues.
Right.
And adjust your approach.
It's not just memorizing a bunch of techniques. It's understanding the psychology behind it all.
It really is. And that's what makes it such a challenge to master.
So let's dive into some of these specific tactics that Smithee outlines.
All right. So one technique he calls is exploiting an instinct to complain.
Oh, we all know people that like to...
We all know them. We all know them.
Right.
It's human nature to want to share our grievances.
Right.
And as skilled interviewers, we can leverage this to gather valuable information.
So you're validating their complaint.
You're validating, you're listening, you're being sympathetic, and you're encouraging them to open up.
And maybe even sharing a similar experience.
Yeah, exactly.
So that they feel like, oh, okay, I'm not the only one.
I'm not the only one that's gone through this.
Right.
And this technique can be really effective when used on people that are on the periphery of the target company.
Okay, like suppliers, former employees.
Former employees, exactly.
So they might have a unique perspective.
They have a very unique perspective.
That people who are closer to the core might not have.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now, another tactic is the use of reported facts, but with a twist.
Reported facts, okay.
It's a twist. The twist is that the facts are actually guesses, or even deliberately inaccurate statements.
Oh, so you're feeding them.
You're feeding them bad information.
Bad information to see what they do with it.
Yes, and the idea is that that they'll correct you.
Right.
And when they correct you,
they'll give you real information.
They give you the real information. And it plays on their desire to be helpful.
Okay.
And to ensure the accuracy of the report.
And also that sort of inherent human need to correct people when they're wrong.
Yes, that's right.
Like, aha, I know something you don't know.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. So another technique that Smithee talks about is confidential bait.
Ooh, confidential bait. This sounds juicy.
This one's fun.
Yeah.
The idea is to offer seemingly confidential information to your source.
Okay.
To create a sense of trust.
Okay, you're making them feel like they're special.
You're making them feel special.
Like they're part of the inner circle.
I'm going to let you in on a secret.
Right.
Now you let me in on a secret.
Right.
But of course, this technique requires careful judgment.
Of course, we don't want to be actually revealing confidential information.
No, absolutely not.
Or misleading them.
No. So it's all about creating a sense of shared confidence.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Now let's move on to the technique of naivete.
Naivete, okay.
So we're playing dumb.
We're playing dumb.
Yes.
This should be fun.
Yeah.
All right.
So the idea is to project a certain level of naivete in specific areas.
Okay.
To prompt the source to instruct you.
So you're getting them to explain it to you like they're a novice.
Exactly. Like, I'm new to this.
Right.
Can you explain this to me? And people...
they love to share their expertise.
They love to share their expertise.
Especially when they feel like...
When they think they're smarter than you.
They're helping someone.
Yes.
Okay.
So, but of course, you've got to strike a balance here.
Right.
You don't want to appear completely uninformed.
Right. You don't want to completely undermine your credibility.
No, you've got to be believable.
Right.
Okay.
So you've got to play it just right.
Exactly. So those are 4 techniques.
Okay. So we've got exploiting complaints.
Yep.
Using reported facts.
Yep.
Offering confidential bait.
Uh-huh.
And feigning naivete.
That's right.
What else does Smithee have for us?
Well, he talks about flattery.
Flattery will get you everywhere.
It will get you everywhere.
So how does that work?
So the idea is to use flattery to encourage the source to elaborate on their accomplishments, their contributions.
So you're stroking their ego a little bit?
You're stroking their ego,
right?
But you're also signaling your interest.
Right. You're saying, tell me more about this thing that you're brilliant at.
Yes, tell me more about that because you're so smart.
Right.
And your company is so successful.
Right. Okay.
Now you can also combine flattery with disbelief.
Okay.
To get them to really defend their expertise.
Oh, interesting. So you're like, oh, I don't know if I believe you.
Yeah, like, I don't know if I buy that.
Right. Tell me more.
Yeah. Okay. So he also talks about provocative statements.
Ooh. Provocative statements.
Yeah, this one is an advanced technique.
Okay.
The idea is to make a statement that's designed to elicit a reaction from the source.
Okay.
To get them to ask questions.
Oh, so you're not even asking questions.
I'm not asking questions.
You're prompting them to ask questions.
I'm getting them to ask me questions.
That's interesting.
Which will ultimately give me the information that I want.
Okay, it's like a chess game.
It is a conversational chess match.
Okay.
And it requires very careful planning.
Yeah, you can't just go in there shooting from the hip.
No, you've got to know what you're doing.
Okay, all right.
Now there's a technique called word repetition.
Oh, I've heard of this.
Have you? Yeah, it's a classic elicitation technique.
Okay.
The idea is to repeat the source's last words.
Right.
Or to rephrase them slightly.
Okay.
Which signals that you're paying attention.
Right. You're actively listening.
Yes.
Right.
And you're encouraging them to elaborate.
Right. You're making them feel heard.
You're making them feel heard.
Understood.
And you're fostering this more open and collaborative exchange.
But if you overdo it, it can backfire.
It can.
Right.
So you've got to be careful.
You don't want to sound like a parrot.
No, you don't want to sound condescending.
Right, right.
Or robotic.
Okay, so it's about finding that sweet spot.
That's right.
Where it feels natural.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then he talks about criticism.
Criticism? Why would you want to...
I know, right?
Criticize the person you're trying to get information from.
So you're offering gentle critiques.
Okay.
Sometimes with a humorous tone.
Okay.
To kind of spark a reaction.
So you might criticize their company?
Their company, their industry.
Okay.
Some of their own work.
Right.
And you're doing it in a way...
To get them to...
To encourage them to defend their position.
Right.
And when they defend their position...
They'll tell you more.
They tell you stuff you want to know.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, but it's a real advanced tactic.
Yeah, this is not for the faint of heart.
This is not.
Wow.
You really need to understand the person.
You've got to know
Yeah.
how far you can push them.
That's right. And then the final one is purposely erroneous statements.
So, like reported facts, you're intentionally getting it wrong.
You are.
Okay.
So in this case, the erroneous statements are very direct and deliberate.
Okay.
And you're presenting information that you know is incorrect.
Right.
With the goal of encouraging the source to correct you.
Okay, so you're basically setting them up
I
for a knowledge slam dunk.
You got it.
Right.
So when they correct you, they often provide really detailed explanations and insights that you wouldn't have gotten otherwise.
Okay, so people like to share their expertise.
They do.
They like to feel smarter than other people.
They do.
And you're leveraging that.
You are.
To get information.
Absolutely.
Wow, this is amazing.
Yeah, it's cool stuff.
So many different ways to
really is.
Guide a conversation.
It is.
And get what you want.
That's right.
It's incredible how many techniques there are for getting information out of people just by talking to them.
I know. It's like a whole new language.
It is. It's like the language of elicitation.
That's right.
But what's interesting is that I think...
Yeah.
Even though we've been talking about elicitation in the context of, due diligence, competitive intelligence.
Right.
You could argue that...
I think you could.
We're all elicitors.
In a way.
To a certain extent.
We are.
Right? We all want to... We're always trying to understand people.
Yeah, understand people. Yeah.
Figure out what they're thinking, what they're feeling.
Yeah.
And sometimes even influence their behavior. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But what sets apart these techniques from, just everyday conversations is that they're being applied deliberately.
In a very strategic
way.
Absolutely. And in high-stakes situations.
Especially in those high-stakes situations, like due diligence.
Due diligence, yeah.
So the information that you get can literally make or break.
It can. It can, yeah, because you're trying to piece together
a whole picture.
The whole picture of a company.
A company, a market.
An industry.
Right.
the competitive landscape, and you're doing it under pressure.
Yeah.
With limited time.
Right. And
the stakes are huge.
You're often dealing with people who don't want to
That's right.
talk.
Portray.
They don't want to share.
Yeah, maybe they signed an NDA.
Right.
They're afraid for their jobs.
Right.
They just don't like you.
And that's what makes these techniques so valuable.
I think so.
Because you're basically able to get around...
Yeah, you're bypassing...
The conscious
defenses and tapping into their unconscious willingness to share.
Right, and you're doing it.
You're doing it.
In a way that doesn't feel threatening.
Right. That's right.
You want to build that rapport.
You're the conversational detective. You got it.
Piecing together all these clues.
Absolutely.
From these seemingly innocent conversations.
That's right.
And just to summarize what we've talked about, I mean, it's not just about memorizing.
It's not just techniques.
It's not just memorizing a bunch of tricks.
Right.
It's about understanding the psychology.
The psychology before we.
Yeah, it's art and science.
Right.
And it's what makes it so interesting.
So interesting.
In a way.
So I think this has been a really
I hope so.
Interesting deep dive into this world of
I think so too.
Elicitation.
Yeah.
And what I think the one key takeaway for our listeners is that
I think the most important thing to remember is that this is a skill that can be developed with practice.
So pay attention to how people communicate.
Absolutely.
How they respond to your different approaches.
Yeah, watch their body language.
Right.
Watch their eyes. It's about becoming a more skillful communicator.
Yeah.
A more perceptive observer of human nature.
That's right.
So thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, this was fun.
Into the world of elicitation.